Greetings, got a gold back again with another video, mainly for the new Hoi4 modding tutorial series. I hope this helps with my mic being closer to me. If it is loud, you can of course adjust your volumes. Today I'm going to discuss how to code ideas. Now, when it comes to actually making the graphics of the ideas is actually in its own department. If you guys maybe want another part to that, please comment down below. And if you are, if you want to see more of this kind of content, or maybe, if I want to expand on the tutorials, I'd be happy to. But for now, let's get on to the task at hand. Now, the first thing is you're going to want to create a mod. Now, there is a tutorial somewhere on my YouTube page. Now, the exact location of that, let me see. The exact location of this tutorial video. Now, of course, you can do like manual installations of mods, but if you're really wanting to make mods for, let's say, you're trying to make your own mod, well, it should be somewhere on my channel. I don't know where it is. I guess it's been a while. But if you guys want a tutorial on how to make a mod, of course, I'd be willing to, give it a whirl and make it a brief video, possibly. But basically, the launcher is really simple. But for now, I'm going to focus on coding the idea. Now, the idea coding in itself is another department in itself, and what you're going to do is once you created your mod, you're going to locate it under your mod directory. Now, it could be anywhere under documents, Paradox Interactive, Hearts of Iron, mod, etc. And what's going to happen is this mod system is going to be where you need for storage of the mods, because without this directory, none of these would work. So you're going to click on it. Now you'll notice that there's two .mods. There's one outside this folder and there's one inside this folder. Like I said, I'm not going to touch that right now, but that'll be another video on how to not only install, but also how to create mods using the launcher, for those of you who don't know. So let's say we're going to start with an idea. Now, there are a few things that you're going to need. Yes, you are going to need a GFX area. You also need inside the GFX folder. And this is for the icon too. The icon will be in a separate video as well. I'm just getting it done ahead of time, so that this way, as the tutorials go on, you can better understand. So next, inside here, you're going to name it interface. Once you go into interface, you will make one that says ideas. Now, you could make your own directory, theoretically, but in order to do so, you need to actually point to the interface that it's going. That will also be explained in another video, I promise you. But aside from the GFX stuff, here's where the coding aspect comes in. You need common, spelled that wrong, and you need ideas. Both the ideas subfolder is where things go. As you can clearly see, if I go into another window, this is the base game, by the way. If I go into common and I go to ideas, you can clearly see that there's text documents for many different nations. If you open them up, you'll get something like this. Now, of course, I haven't opened it in Notepad++, so it might throw some of you off. Don't worry. So let's try the CSA, for instance. This is an aircraft manufacturer. These ones are mainly designed for when you go into the political tabs and you select on, like, you know how, like, the company icons? Basically something like this. These can be very handy, but depending on where you put them will determine their use. For example, it says designer, which means it's a designer company. A designer company idea is not a national spirit. It's an idea, but it's not a national spirit. Those are the two categories that are different. You could also get, actually, there's a bunch of them. You could also get not prime ministers, although that's for another mod if you wanted to. So you can get prime ministers, technically, if you code the ideas right, but vanilla-based game, you can actually get political advisors. These ones are very useful. They're similar to like the laws, except these people you can actually hire, and they have their own individual effects, modifiers, or traits. Hence, their uses for the department depending on like what direction you want to go. Like for example, say if you play as Russia and you want to turn it fascist, you can do that, but it needs support. How do you get support? There's a passive modifier that does that for you. And if you are wanting to learn even more about stuff like this, and let's say you want to get the better grip on how this works, I do have an assorted list of these modifiers right here on my bookmarks. I will leave them in the description below if you are interested. And you can also feel free to bookmark them similar to how I did it. So there's that. So let's make a basic national spirit. We don't want to make a company, or maybe we don't want to make a minister icon, which that's where the whole, advisors come into play. Let's say we need a template. Now, there are a few nations that you could use. I would prefer going towards the great powers first, because the great powers have the most influential, but also most of the best ideas. Like, for example, Great Depression right here. That's the United States, right? So what you're going to do is we can copy this. We don't need to worry about any companies or all that crap. We can just simply do it as is. Also, I will say, in order to avoid excess errors on this mod, I would highly recommend avoid naming any of your files after any of them. Or unless if they are the most updated ideas list. The main reason is because the game may not recognize any of the spacing. It could basically come out faulty and say, oh, this idea doesn't match, or you have ideas that are missing. Yes, ideas can cause errors when done wrong. Same with virtually any other department in coding. Now, of course, this is only one segment of coding, but I'm getting off track. Now, you could also do generics, but again, I would avoid doing that. So you should come up with your own name, or at least your very own name for the file. It doesn't matter what name you can put the file, as long as you know what it is and it's different, it's unique, you can keep track of it, and it still works in game. Now, of course, if it doesn't work in game, that's when sometimes you have to do a little problem solving. It's all just trial and error and probing the problems, basically. So let's start off. For example, we want a nation to have this bonus idea. So let's pick randomly. We can just call this file, by the way, tutorial. And the nation that we want it to affect, it also depends on the triggers. So like, for example, it says allowed or allowed during Civil War. Allowed during Civil War, always yes, means that even during the midst of Civil War, that country tag or whoever has this idea will always have it. That means they will never lose it during a Civil War. But of course, you can change it to no. Also, I forgot to mention, you may notice that there are these brackets right here. And if you're really concerned of how this is set up, follow this appearance as close as you can. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but these brackets are very important. These are what you call containers for your coding. Because if you don't contain the coding that is in the setup, you could cause codage leaking, and basically it could break the game and potentially crash it too, depending on how big of an error it is. or the idea just may not work in general. It may not appear. It all depends on the effect. So like for example, if I added an extra bracket here or here, it'll really ruin this idea. And it's also appropriate to use them in the best areas possible. So if I had to, let's say, here, let me move this down for you. So ignore this bottom, forget this one exists, focus on my arrow. So you just do ideas, and this is the first bracket. You may see that it's red, that's because it's not being used. Then, after that, you hit space. Now, I would say hit 2 spaces, so that this way, one could be for the bracket, the lower bracket, and it's the opposite side bracket, by the way. You hit tab, and then you can do country. This is a more manual way of doing this. It's probably the best way because at least you'll know what's going on. This space right here isn't really much of importance as long as the pathing is there. So let's use the Great Depression as our template, and we can, I mean, if you want to also add a space too, that's perfectly fine. It's up to you. I'm only doing it here just so that this way it's, it represents what you just saw here and it's easier to understand. So I hope it helps in that area. Now, I'll explain briefly what each one does. Of course, you have the modifier, which as long as you have this idea, these are the modifiers that you'll get. But see if we wanted different ones. And again, I will leave this in a link in the description down below. Basically, these are pages that describe modifiers, as well as it also accumulates all the other compartments too, such as effects, triggers, defines, localization, scopes, on actions, etc., etc. I can try to explain, I could, but for now we're only focusing on the idea. It does have its own descriptions too, which is also why I'm going to leave it down below. Maybe it might explain a little better than I will. I'm just giving you a basic overview. Now, let's say this tutorial idea, we want it to target a particular nation. What said nation is clearly up to the player or up to the coder in this case. So let's say you want it to target Ireland. You can do that. All you need to do is you could do tag equals IRE, which basically should be Ireland. If you're not sure of the tag to use for that country, there's a simple fix for that. All you go is to the main directory, you go to common, then you go to country. Well, you could go to countries, but you could go to country tags. And as you can see here, there's a bunch of them, or at least inside the folder. Now, where is Ireland? You just type Ireland. It found it, IRE. That's the tag that you use. Pretty easy, right? So that's the tag it'll point to, or at least should point to, once they obtain this idea. But of course, doing this right here isn't enough. You do need to code it in the history section of this mod, which is why I will also bring that up too. History. You could also have these ideas obtained from events, but in this case, to make it simple, I'm only going to do the history aspect of it. So you need history, and you need countries. Then, once you have countries, you find the country tag you're looking for, which is IRE, is the ID for the national ID for Ireland in this case. So you find it, copy, or you can use also Control C for copying, or you can just right click it if it's comfortable with you. I'm using a Windows 11, so it might be a different of a setup, but it should be relatively same. Like, even if I do show more options, it's practically similar in a lot of ways, as you can see. So you do Control C, Control V. Copy and paste without affecting the vanilla game. Then what you're going to do, you're going to open this, edit with Notepad++, Also, I completely forgot to mention, if you do not have Notepad++, I will also leave that in the description down below for those of you who want to follow along or try to understand. I'm very sorry for not saying that early on, but it'll be down there, trust me. So here we have the politics, we may have leaders, we have bookmark time periods. These are all well and good, but we're only here to add the idea. So what you're going to do, I usually put mine above the politics, but you can pretty much put it wherever you want, as long as it's not within this scope or something like this. You can't also put it inside set politics or set popularity. No, it has to be its own thing. There are two ways you can do this, and in the links down below, we'll also describe them to you. You could do add ideas equals your idea, but in this case, we're going to do tutorial idea, or you pretty much do whatever ID you want, but in this case, I'm only going to do tutorial to keep it simple. And for the picture ID, I'm not going to lie, is very strange to say the least, but there is a way to fix this. All you need to do is, once you're in the interface, well, I mean, we'll get to that another time, but basically the idea is to make the ID of the path match for this. Now, if you don't want to deal with all that, there is another option you could do. You could do something like two quotations. You do GFX / interface / ideas / tutorial.dds, or if you really wanted to, PNG. Yes, these do work as well. So for the sake of this, I will stick to PNG, only because, you know, make sure it works. Now, of course, if this doesn't work, we could always try DDS again with another thing. It's completely up to you. Even the tutorials at times should mention it. Like, for example, if you're on this page or something, and let me just find it very quickly. Sorry for the hold up. So if we go to ideas, idea modding, of course it has the generic setup that you see before you. You have the localization of it, which this will also come in the video. And when it comes to picture, you can clearly see you can use the path for that. You could also use quotation, or you don't have to. It's completely up to you. Although I think for the purpose of this, I will try quotation just to see what happens. If it doesn't work, I'll just take them off and it should work. So for the modifiers, back to the modifiers. So what kind of modifier would you want for this tutorial national spirit? Do you want the surrender limit to be higher? Do you want minimum export modifications? Do you want political modifications? It is up to you. Just follow along with these descriptions, pay close attention to brackets, you'll be good to go. Then, what we're going to do, so this is just going to be an example, we're going to make Ireland drift to communist by 0.03. Now, what does 0.03 mean? Now, as it clearly states, in this uses, oh wait, those are versions. It clearly states that the drifts are basically a flat rate. Sometimes it could be percentage, but in this case, just typing in 1 is literally a whole point drift. Like, this will really make it drift a lot. I would say this is actually 100 drift points when you really get down to the nitty-gritty, which is why you have to use a percentage of that, hence the values. So this is going to go up by at least 0.03, which could be the equivalent of 3%. If you wanted to go up to 10%, you could just do this. You can type that in. If you want to add an extra 0, that's fine. If you want to make it go up by, I don't know, 25%, you could do that as well. It's completely up to you, but for the sake of it, let's just do 5% as a test. Communism, drift, also ideological modding. That'll also be another video. But like I said, you guys gotta request that for it to happen. Anyways, now that you have your basic idea, you don't need to make it too complicated. As long as you have the image afterwards, you're all set. Which I think I will actually make a part 2 to this. And once all your coding is well aligned, you should be good to go. Now the next stop is add the tutorial idea, hence what we just did. Then what you're going to do is once it's in here, once you have this idea set up, now you go back to the launcher and make sure that this is checked. It will not work if you don't check this. If you have a problem with your launcher, try recaching, try reinstalling, try clearing some of the excess files that you may not need. Like, what I mean by that is you could also go to the game settings. You can clear cache or user directory, which will clear a lot of things out. But once the game loads again, it'll help you reestablish stuff. But I would recommend, before you do this, back up your mods wherever they are. This mods area, make sure this is backed up. Of course, I do have a backup of cache here, but I technically don't need it right now. But it's always advisable to make sure that everything else you don't have to worry too much about. Settings, you might need to. It also depends on that, but I'm getting a little off topic. So let's test this out, shall we? Now that we have it assigned, we hit play. Also, it may come up a question mark in case I didn't mention. The question mark being that it is missing its icon. At least for the GFX and interface aspects of it. But, like I said, that's not for this video. This video is strictly for coding ideas. And you'll notice reason why we use brackets is because you'll see that more often or not in this game. Now we go to single player, we go to new, and we need to try to find Ireland. And as you can clearly see, there it is. There's the idea right at the start of the game. Now you could put it in bookmarks too, but I'm not going to do all that right now. But it all depends on how you do things. So once you have daily communism support like showing up and it says tutorial, you're all set. You can localize that ID, by the way, too. You don't have to use lowercase, which comes to my next part, which is probably one of my favorite parts too, aside from GFX. You can localize the text. And you could also just put it here, .yml, which is the format, by the way. But for the sake of convenience and consistency, I'm only going to put it under English, but it also depends on your language, group 2. You can put it under any language you want, so long as it's readable. It's up to you. And when you get into this, you're going to do new document, clear everything, and you're going to put something like tutorial ideas underscore L underscore English, or whatever language you're using, .yml. Hit yes, and you're all set. You may open it, and as you know, before you start anything when it comes to localizing in this game, or pretty much any Paradox game I've noticed, this needs to have a specific encoding. What I mean by that is UTF-8 bomb. This will cause errors if you don't do this. That'll clutter up your error list, so always be sure of that. Now to start these off, we're going to do L underscore English, and then the colon mark, or the 2 dots basically on your keyboard, if you have them. Then we're going to hit save. Make sure that you save because you may lose track of stuff. Now we're going to also organize this. And here's a fun little tip to organize your ideas. This symbol comments out your text. It prevents your text and comments from being labeled in the coding and causing it to screw up, basically. So, for example, if I should put tutorial idea or ideas, you could put another bracket on. You could put another, not a bracket, a symbol, number sign at the end if you like. I'm going to keep it there for convenience. But let's say if I don't have these, this is going to ruin the game. So, also, it's always best to, make sure that you have them. You don't need the one on the end. The one at the beginning is most important. You need at least one. Okay? Alright. Now, back to tutorial. So, we're going to type, you go into the ID, you copy it, Control-C, and like I just did, Control-V. Now, there was a time when you can also use this symbol, and this, but you don't actually need a number at the end of this. As long as it's localized, you're all set. I found that out kind of the hard way, not gonna lie. And then we'll just put, for the tutorial idea icon, we'll just call it the spread of Marxism. Now, keep in mind, it's going to come up as this text, but this will always be the ID. Not the title up here. Down here, right below this symbol. Okay? Now, you could do a description for it. How you do that? You copy it, and you go underscore, or the ID, which in this case is tutorial underscore desk. You can't put description. That's too long. It's just desk, basically. Then we'll just put Marxism has been spreading in Ireland for some time now. Now, this is, of course, historically inaccurate for those of you who some of you who are watching this and probably thinking that's not right. No, this is purely alternate history, or at the very least in this case, just for the sake of testing. So you don't have to do it like this. This is strictly an example, so I have to make that very clear. Once you have them, you're all set. You can reopen the game, see the text. Now, I hope this tutorial has helped you. I'm going to open this again just to see where the idea is, to make sure that the text works well enough. Now, if you really want to add flavor to this idea, you could also change the politics and the ideological party sizes if you want. And as you can see, it's only mentioning certain other things from other mods. It's also mentioning, maybe you're missing... It could also mean that you're missing the interface, but it's not listed here yet. But this is basically the idea, is to minimize the amount of errors as much as humanly possible. As you can see, there's only about 4. Or technically 3 if you don't count this. I don't know where this incorrect checksum came from. But I do have all the DLCs, by the way. So you go single player, new game, you go in, find Ireland, and boom, you're all set. And don't worry about the debug key. That's only because I'm in debug mode. I have a link for that on my desktop. Marxism has been spreading in Ireland for some time now. And as you can clearly see, there it is. And that's how you make a national spirit. A basic one, but that's how you start to make them. Well, that's about wraps it up for the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for part 4 of the series. Part 4, I will actually, try to show you more on... Well, actually, it depends on what you guys vote for. Whatever you guys vote for, the next tutorial, which will be in the community page on my channel. In case you're not sure, I'll also leave a link for that as well. But please vote on your next idea for tutorial. And if you really want me to recover something like how to install or how to create a mod for Hoi4, then you gotta get some votes. Anyways, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching.
United 93, that traffic view is 1 o'clock, 12 miles eastbound 370.